Hi everyone, I'm Asmeen Bhatt,
And I'm Nirav Thosani.
and we are here to discuss our new article published in GIE called Endoscopy Ergonomics, a survey-based study exploring gender differences.
So, where did this gender difference aspect come in the picture?
So I think gender difference is important to study. In 2020, about 17% of all practicing gastroenterologists in the United States were females, although the number of female fellows in training was up to 39%. So our expectation is that in the future there'll be more female gastroenterologists in practice. Now we know that females have lesser muscle mass and lesser muscle strength than male participants. So females in general have 36% lesser skeletal muscle mass than men, and also females have lesser upper body strength. So the differential in upper body strength is about 50% between females and males, while lower body strength, the differential is only 30%. So considering all these factors, it was important to study the gender differences.
Now, let's briefly talk about our study design and participants.
So as in most ergonomic-based studies, it was a survey-based study. We had 34 multiple choice questions that were designed in REDCap and emailed to participating gastroenterologists. And of our respondents, 38.3% were female. And in general, we found that female participants were shorter in height, had smaller hand sizes, while male participants performed more number of weekly cases and also performed more advanced endoscopic procedures than female participants.
What about endoscopy style and techniques? Did we find any gender differences there?
So we did actually. We found significant difference in 3 different elements. The first thing is that female participants liked holding the endoscope with the umbilical cord outside their forearm. So 90% of the female participants preferred this versus only 50% of our male participants. In terms of the small wheel deflection, about 50% of the female participants actually preferred using their right hand to deflect the small wheel, versus only 30% of the male participants used that feature. And the third major differential we found is that in scoping patients with a low BMI or a petite patient, about 89% of the female participants preferred starting with a pediatric colonoscope compared to only 65% of the male participants. Now, we did not find any differences in terms of endoscopy room setup, equipment setup, and other features when it came to both the genders.
Alright, let's talk about endoscopy related injuries.
So in terms of endoscopy related injury, our study found that 49.5% of all practicing gastroenterologists experienced some form of injury. Now, in the study, we found that females in general have a significantly higher risk of having injury, and the site of risk that was found was the wrist. Other sites of pain and tingling and numbness, the amount of injury between males and females was about the same. We also looked at univariate and multivariate logistic regression analysis to find contributing factors relating to injury. And we found that female gender by itself is a contributing factor to cause injury, while working with GI fellows is actually protective towards injury. We did not find any difference in ergonomic injury when it came to other factors, such as performing more weekly case volumes or more advanced endoscopy procedures, or just the endoscope hold technique, the one we mentioned earlier, whether you hold it outside or inside your forearm, that did not affect endoscopy related injury.
So, what are the things that can be done to improve ergonomics?
So in our study, we found that more female participants actually liked using a pre-endoscopy ergonomic checklist. This checklist looks at simple things like the position of the bed, the position of the monitor, how the endoscopist is standing, where the tower is. The second thing that females actually preferred is to use a posture sensor, which will tell the endoscopist if they're slouching or not in the correct position during the procedure. And females also preferred wearing a brace at sites of pain to help control the pain. Now, in general, all participants actually wanted more endoscopy ergonomic related education. So that was a universal answer we got. Another thing that all participants wish to do is to try out new redesigned endoscopes.
So, what are some of our major discussion points here?
So 2 previous non-US studies had shown that female gastroenterologists suffer from more endoscopy related injury. And in 2021, there was a large US study that actually did not find any significant gender differences when it came to endoscopy related injury. But that study did find that female participants suffered from more upper body injury and male participants suffered from more low back pain. So our study is the first one to find that female gastroenterologists are at a higher risk of endoscopy related injury, and the site of injury with the highest risk is the wrist. Now, we mentioned earlier that females have lower skeletal muscle mass and lower upper body strength, and this could explain some of these findings.
So what are some of the limitations of our study?
So like most ergonomics studies, this is a survey-based study, so we cannot find direct causality in this study. It had a small n. We just used practicing gastroenterologists for our study. We did not include fellows. We did not include surgeons, internists, other folks that perform endoscopy. There could be some geographical variation. The majority of our respondents were from the great state of Texas, so there could be regional variation. The other thing is that more than 75% of our respondents were academic gastroenterologists. So we could presume that if more private gastroenterologists were answering this survey, they would perhaps have a higher weekly case volume or other factors that could contribute to injury. So we may have underestimated endoscopy-related injury. And lastly, I'd like to say that every gastroenterologist practices in more than one location in different hospitals under different endoscopy settings in terms of the rooms, the equipment, the training of the staff that they work with. So it's hard to generalize when they answer questions regarding endoscopy-related injury and preferences in one single survey.
What are some of the strengths of our study?
So ours was the first study, as I mentioned earlier, to find a statistical difference between females and males in terms of endoscopy-related injury. And we were also the first study to show some gender preferences, such as females preferring to hold the endoscope with the umbilical cord outside the forearm, females preferring to use their right hand to deflect the small wheel of the scope, and also females preferring to use a pediatric colonoscope to start a case in a patient with a low BMI or a petite patient.
So what are your final thoughts?
So my final thoughts are simple endeavors for ergonomics control include adjustable monitor, an adjustable bed height, using an anti-fatigue mat, good support shoes, wearing a two-piece lead apron, having properly functional tools and endoscopes in your endoscopy unit. So these things can be easily achieved and should be goal and standard for every practicing endoscopist. Now, other things that we mentioned in the study are that endoscopy ergonomic education is a simple thing that will increase the longevity of all endoscopists. So if we know what we are prone to, we are likely to protect ourselves. We also gave certain ideas for our endoscope manufacturing companies and industry partners in terms of, for example, the umbilical cord attachment to the endoscope processor could be freely rotating, so that would make our upper left arm movement more smoother. The other thing we mentioned is in our wheels on the scopes, they could be electric powered, sort of like our electric powered steering wheels in cars and modern vehicles, instead of being purely mechanical. So that takes away some of the muscle strength used in the fingers, wrists, thumbs, etc. So we hope you enjoyed our video and would go ahead and read our paper, and we do welcome your thoughts and any opinions and suggestions.